Hanging in one of the galleries of the Philadelphia Art Museum is a painting depicting a conflagration at the end of a long bridge. On the bank opposite the blaze, helpless onlookers are huddled as they witnessed an historical building going up in flames. This painting is known as the Burning of the Houses of Lords and Commons, 16th October 1834. It is the work of English Romantic painter J.M.W. Turner and is one of two pieces depicting the events of that fateful night in October 1834 when the London skies glowed red as the medieval Palace of Westminster was destroyed. The sudden loss of this former residence for English royalty and the current seat of the Parliament of England undoubtedly shook Londoners to their cores. But as is so often the case in the aftermath of tragic fires, plans were soon underway to rebuild the Palace of Westminster while incorporating aspects of the original complex which had survived the blaze. Following a competition for the design of the reconstruction, architect Charles Barry and his Gothic Revival style were selected. Barry's design was heavily informed by 14th and 15th century English Perpendicular Gothic precedents, which themselves were informed by the style of the earlier Westminster Abbey, located just across the street from the Palace of Westminster and the subject of my previous video. As part of Charles Barry's reconstruction, he enlisted the help of Augustus Pugin in applying a Gothic language to the entire project. Pugin himself was a leading authority on Gothic architecture, and it was his work on the iconic Elizabeth Tower that would be his final and most widely recognized work. The Palace of Westminster boasts one of the most distinctive skyline profiles of any landmark in the world. It's no accident that the enormous 300-meter-long riverfront facade butts right up against the Thames, allowing the Houses of Parliament to be seen from a variety of points along this crucial bend in the river. On the opposite side of the complex, Westminster Hall proudly stands as one of the only remaining structures to have survived the fire of 1834, as well as an even earlier inferno in 1512. Westminster Hall, therefore, dates back to the original palace construction, which was completed in 1097 CE. Even more astonishing is the fact that to this very day, the hall has the longest clear-span medieval roof in England. The most famous feature of the entire complex, however, is the 315-foot Elizabeth Tower, colloquially known as Big Ben. The iconic clock tower has 4 clock faces measuring 23 feet in diameter, containing the second largest 4-face chiming clock in the world. The largest of the bells, known as the Great Bell, or more commonly Big Ben, has been in use since 1858. Several theories argue over exactly which Benjamin for whom the bell was named, so naturally this ongoing debate has led to the bell's and the tower's nickname of Big Ben. As we move to the middle of the palace, we come to the centermost steeple of the Parliament complex, appropriately called the Central Tower. At 299 feet, it is also the shortest of the 3 towers, but the rather elegant appearance of the Central Tower belies its initially far more functional purpose as a ventilation shaft for hundreds of fireplaces throughout the complex. And finally, though certainly not to be outdone by its more esteemed neighbor, the southwest tower of the Houses of Parliament complex comes in at 323 feet. Just slightly taller than Big Ben, Victoria Tower is arguably the most conspicuously designed of the 3. With heavy, rounded corners and dramatic arched entryways and windows, it is visually the most pronounced aspect of the complex. Palace of Westminster is a piece I originally designed and built back in 2015. I was fortunate enough to debut the work at the Brick event in London, which was the very first international LEGO event I ever attended. Today, more than 6 years later, I knew I could improve on numerous aspects of the original with which I had never been entirely satisfied. It's always a tricky balancing act in determining whether to completely restart a design from scratch or use the existing framework with a handful of significant changes. In this case, though, I went with the latter and ended up preserving roughly 70% of my original piece. That other 30%, though, features numerous improvements upon the original. Aspects such as Westminster Hall and Old Palace Yard have been completely reworked and now include details which were altogether omitted from the original. Two such examples of this would be the perimeter fencing and stonework along the public sidewalk and the newly castellated walls of Westminster Hall. These details are actually accomplished using LEGO minifigure legs, which is an innovative parts usage I first discovered and implemented in my 2021 landscape piece depicting 1st century Jerusalem. If you'd like to see more of that particular project, I'll be sure to add a link in the description below. And now it's time for the best parts of the redesign effort, and for that, I'll just have to grab a couple things off the shelf right behind me. It should probably come as no surprise that the two most conspicuous elements of the Houses of Parliament complex are also ones which I put some of the most effort into redesigning. Starting with Victoria Tower, you can see that the original version, while certainly innovative in its structural design, did not quite capture the considerable heft of the 4 octagonal corners. This was the first area I chose to address as I switched out various Technic elements in favor of newer tan ingot tiles. On the other hand, the facade details of Victoria Tower were some of my absolute favorite moments of the original design, so much of these have been preserved, with the exception of a few color swaps which help to better delineate the orders of arches along the way up. As we reach the top, the differences become much more pronounced, with thicker corner spires made up of palm tree tops, better corresponding to the thicker tower corners. There are also some really fun details like golden arched window elements which are sunken into the bricks used for the rooftop, as well as the Union Jack flag sticker from LEGO set 8639 and 5 microphone elements used for the pinnacles of each spire. Structurally, both versions of Victoria Tower are identical. Situated on a 5x5 stud footprint, the corners rise completely independently from the decorative interior elements. In fact, many of these interior subassemblies are not actually attached to the broader structure, but remain in place thanks to the rigid frame provided by the corners. The corners are then neatly bundled back together at the top, creating one unified representation of Victoria Tower. And last but certainly not least, we have Elizabeth Tower, or Big Ben. For this redesign, I opted to completely reimagine the overall design. I had always felt that my original take, although properly segmented along its vertical facade, felt slightly bloated as a result of the facade elements protruding slightly from the corners, rather than being slightly recessed as they are in the real tower. To remedy this, I implemented a fairly common technique of displaying the undersides of 1x2 jumper plates. It turns out, however, that the internal connections for these elements are far less common, as each sideways plate relies on sandwiching a 2x2 jumper plate between 2 studs. The top of Big Ben is where things get particularly exciting. The new version uses custom printed tiles featuring an image of the clock faces after their recent extensive restoration. Additionally, the clocks are outlined by golden finials in the form of wand elements, which are held to the structure using a pair of standard number 8 size rubber bands. The tower culminates in a 2x2x2 quadruple slope, which is joined to the lower rooftop section using both gold bucket handles and small Technic treads. And to round it all off, we have this 4x4 rounded plate with a 2x2 hull, which helped to accommodate much of the interior details of the clock faces, while also interconnecting all the delicate little corner details. Funnily enough, this element became available in dark tan just days before I ordered the parts needed for this redesign effort. Which all just goes to show that the timing of certain projects can be quite serendipitous, whether it's a new for 2022 LEGO brick or a once-in-a-lifetime exhibition opportunity all the way back in 2015. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I really hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something along the way. As always, I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons over on Patreon. It really bears repeating that by becoming a patron, You're helping me build the kind of self-reliance I need as an artist in order to create on my own terms in this day and age. If you'd like to become a patron, you'll find the link to my Patreon page in the description below. You'll get immediate access to plenty of exclusive and weekly content, and you'll be the first to see my new work months before it's made public. You'll also get access to patron-only giveaways like signed prints, small buildable kits, and custom printed commemorative bricks. So thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I think you all are really going to love what's next on my list, and I'll be sure to share regular updates on Instagram and Patreon. Until then, that which is done well enough is done quickly enough. Festina Lente.